Today, the Taipei Salon, our speaker is Professor Joseph Allen. The topic is Taiwan seen through a Japanese lens from 1895 to 1905. Professor Allen is the chair of Asian Language and Literature at the University of Minnesota. Professor Allen's current interest is the study of photography in contemporary Taiwan.
Taiwan as a colony coincided with his photographic techniques, which closely linked colonization and photography together. And this means that photography in some ways produces the colony. And this differs very much from the earlier colonies of France, England, and Germany, in which the photography comes later. There are many later expeditionary photographs that we see and albums of them. The most extensive and famous is the famous Musha expedition, the Wushe incident of 1930, and its accompanying album, which is very detailed, a very long and detailed album. And I'm not going to show you that album, but one of the things I wanted to say about it is, if you look through the album, there's almost a complete suppression of the obvious violence that came from this brutal expedition. This is the expedition in which airplanes were brought in and the Aboriginal villages were bombed with poison gases as sort of, modern warfare on these small villages above the Wusha village. But all of that is suppressed, and you get again sort of this ideology of encampment, this disciplined and sort of slightly beneficial looking force that goes through the story and returns triumphantly, of course, to Taiwan, to Taipei City, to the capital. From what I've just said, you would think that all the photographs are of this expedition, but actually very few of them are. Of the sometimes somewhat 80 photographs or so, most of them have nothing to do with the expedition, but rather are photographs of the island in sort of its pre-colonial state, sort of in its traditional or native state, sort of presenting the island as an object of desire, what we are going to possess and which we're going to change. And there's a fascination with presenting sort of the earlier forms of culture that before the civilization have arrived of the colony, quote unquote. I say civilization in quotes. And here we have a montage of 3 such sort of pre-colonial space cultural icons. One in the upper left being the Aboriginal people, and of course the Aboriginal people of Taiwan are the most iconic of this sort of uncivilized world that the Japanese are portraying. But also the much more sort of elite figure, the Chinese courtesan on your right, and there's been a great deal of written about the portrayal of the native woman in colonial photography, particularly in French photography of Nigeria and Egypt. And this is a sort of sample of that that you see in the Japanese photography. And perhaps most iconic are these rural scenes with a water buffalo. The water buffalo becomes the symbol of Taiwan at this period, and it becomes a symbol of Taiwan as it stands against the modernizing urban scenes that we see at the beginning of the album. And this dichotomy of the water buffalo and sort of the new architecture remains a dichotomy throughout the whole colonial period, right up until the end of the colony. Who is this guy and why is he smiling? That's my question. If you know, write it down. Without a context, either verbal or graphical, this photograph remains open to interpretation. it is a story that is unwritten or yet to be written. These stories, all of these stories, are built from a collection of cultural information, real or imagined, none of which are totally true. That is, the stories are constructions, culturally constructions, that have a ideological or a psychological purpose. What is the story that we would tell about this photograph?
Dr. Allen, thanks a lot. I don't have a particular question. I just want to say that you are doing a great job teaching these kids in the United States about Taiwan. Now, about the talk that we all witnessed here today, it told us a lot about Japan, actually. And what I felt was a little bit lacking, but I do understand also, looking from the title, seeing Taiwan through a Japanese lens, your focus was very much on a lens, but somehow maybe we could have benefited a bit more, but okay, there is time constraints. If you, in addition to the explanation you gave in a cultural studies way, also put in some more explanation on the zeitgeist, like the more anthropological aspect of it, which would have helped like how for us, the audience, to situate Japan at the time as an emerging colonial power. And then would balance out more the objectification that we had very much today of Taiwan through the pictures. Okay, thank you.
Excuse me. I hope my students agree with you, but yes, much more could be done here. But let me just comment briefly in terms of technology. Okay, obviously, photography was invented in Europe in the 1850s and spread across the world very, very fast, and came to Japan through European. Sort of European learning, sort of Dutch learning, it's called, right? I mean, and of course, because of that, it was sort of in lag, right? There was a disparity. They were all slightly behind, right? But that's actually by 1895. That's not true. In terms of photographic technology, Japan is not a developing nation, all right? In terms of this technology alone, Japan is actually leading the way. I haven't done this investigation completely, but if you sort of look at the history of halftone printing, halftone printing doesn't really get off the ground in the United States until after 1900. And this is 1896, 1899. This is a very sophisticated technology that's already there. So it's at least what they call coeval, right? It's at least at the same time, and it may actually be leading the technology at this point. So, I mean, Japan is developing in many ways, and they are learning to become a colonizing power in many ways. But their control of this technology makes them full partners, and maybe more than that, in the modern world as they're going into it. One thing I need to do is do more investigation about what's happening sort of in other photographic industries at the same time. But my sense is right now is that they are full partners in this process. And they brought it to Taiwan by 1899, 1896, 1900. We know there's a photographic industry in Taiwan, which 10 years before was I mean, just completely. It was very, very little there. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Adam. Okay, thank you.